despite the extra bells and whistles you may be getting here with modifiers, the actual modeling tools I'm using within the software, within Blender that is pretty much the same as those I'm using in Maya. So what I mean by that is I'm only using about 3 or 4 specific tools to get the job done. And those would be extrude, loop cuts, and knife tools. Pretty much, that's all there is really. Apart from that, in Maya, you would probably have to manually bevel these things, but the other tool in this case is the bevel tool, and everything else is pretty much the same. The methods are the same, the principles are the same, and if I wanted to, I can easily export this out to either Maya, Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, you name it. G'day everyone, Dicko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. This is part 2B of a multi-part series all about 3D modeling for noobs. And in this video, we are starting on the same thing we did in the last video, but in Blender, just to show you that it can be done. It's exactly the same with a few extra tricks up its sleeve that make it a little bit easier than, in my opinion, than modeling in Maya. For those who are just starting out, I also have my screencast keys turned on as well. So if you need to look at that, see what I'm clicking, go ahead and do that. I won't bring up exactly what I like when I'm pressing on my keyboard most of the time, unless it's important. Apart from that, let's just jump right in and get started. So yeah, as you can see here, again, if you've never used Blender before, I highly suggest you check out the Blender YouTube page and get an understanding of the layout, at least at first, and then come to this video series. Otherwise, just jump right in. So what I like to do is have one viewport set with all things visible. So, you know, lights, cameras, whatever you need to use, edit mode, etc. And the other window, I like to basically have it almost like a render preview. So I have everything off in my overlays, so everything's turned off. That way I can actually see what I want to do with this this scene. Anyway, let's get started. So first thing, go to view. I'm going to reset my 3D cursor, so create that cube in the middle. And just like the other video, I'm going to create a cube, jump straight into edit mode. And in this case, the cube is way larger. And that's because within Blender, the base unit in Blender is meters, whereas in Maya, it's centimeters. So be aware of that. The scale is pretty much the same. It's just a matter of understanding the base unit. So what I'm going to do is just snap this cube to the base of this environment, and just jumping between my faces and my edges, I'm just going to scale this thing around. I'm not going to use the scale tool. I'm just going to move the faces around to suit. Now you may see me use things that aren't available in Maya in this setup, and namely that would probably be the mirror modifier. And the mirror modifier in this case is kind of a godsend, because instead of having to sort of rustle between doing each side perfectly to the other, I can kind of just do one side and not worry about it. I could do that in Maya, but it's just a bit of a pain in the ass to set up, especially if you're just starting out. Whereas in Blender, it's a bit easier. So in Blender, to do a mirror modifier, it's pretty straightforward, and I'll get through that in the future. With the base of this, I don't think we need it for this one, so we should be fine. But for the top part, definitely going to be using that for the roof. So I'm going to bring up the layout, the base of that building, you know, into scale. I'm going to grab another cube. I'm going to scale that one up. Well, bring it up, sorry. And just like before, I'm just going to go into edit mode and start editing that to suit the layout. Yeah, you maybe notice that the sketch itself is actually a little bit different in terms of color, and that's because I'm relying on the grease pencil object in this case rather than having to export out geometry. So that's another nice little perk of using Blender in this case. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use the mirror modifier for this building already. So what I'm going to do is select the loop on one side and delete it. So what I want to do is mirror across the Y in this case, because along the X it's asymmetrical, the house is asymmetrical. So along the Y, that will be enough. So I'm going to go to my mirror modifier here. So this little button here, go to the modifier tab, I'm going to add a mirror. And you can see here by default, it actually mirrors along X. We can switch that out, mirror along Y, easy peasy. You can see as well, we have a little issue here, is that the those cubes aren't perfectly aligned. And that's partly because of the loop I created to cut that out. So that's really easy to fix. So what we need to do is just go to clipping, turn on clipping, turn off X-axis mirroring, by the way, as well. And in edit mode, all I need to do is select the edge loop that goes around that cube and just mirror it. The nice thing about clipping as well is that you can't, once you hit that middle section, they kind of merge together automatically. Whereas in Maya, it doesn't do that. You can't merge automatically with mirrored instances in Maya, which makes it a lot harder to teach if you're just starting out. All right, what I'm gonna do now is do an extrusion. And you can use an extrusion just like in Maya. So you can actually push the extrude region button, or I can push E on my keyboard and just extrude up. I like using the E keyboard shortcuts, but I'll push the button just to show you how it looks. Here's a little icon here to show what direction that's going to be extruded at. Push the little plus icon and drag it up. And there we have it. There's our extrusion. Now the nice thing about the settings in Maya, in Blender in this case, is that unlike Maya where you push extrude and it automatically just creates this extrude overlapping the faces, with the tools in Blender, you actually have to tell Blender to extrude it before it actually extrudes, which makes it way less likely to cause any accidents, which is also really nice. All right, what I'm going to do now is go into edge mode and just bring that up with the move tool into place, just like that. See here, it's mirroring across exactly how I want it, which is really, really nice in that regard. Now for the roof, I'm just going to actually separate this roof. And the nice thing about this tool as well, or using this software, is that if I'm going to separate the roof, it will also inherit that mirror modifier as well, which is going to be really useful for us because we won't have to create any more setup. So in order to do that, it's really simple. I'm going to select the face here, and I don't have to worry about I can't select the other face because it's just a mirrored instance. But I'm going to select this face here and push P on my keyboard, and you get this little menu here. And I want to separate by selection. So I'm going to separate this particular part of the faces by this selection. And what this does, it actually automatically separates it and creates a new object. So you can see here that we can now select the roof from the body of the house, and it's now a separate piece. And if I move it up, you can see it's actually cut away that selection completely. Another nice thing in this software is that you can actually just, instead of having to create a layer system to avoid clicking on something, I can just push the disable selection button in the menu here, which is also really easy to do anyway. All right, so selecting the roof, I'm going to select the, go into edit mode and just scale along X, just like we did within Maya. And with this edge here, so go into the edge selection mode, you can see I want to have that overhang just like we had in the other house, but this time I'm going to go into the orientation. I need to bring that down along the orientation. So just like in Maya, I can switch the orientation from global to, in this case, called normal rather than component, and that will allow me to scale it down to have a bit of an overhang. The rest is actually really simple. It's actually very similar. So now all I need to do is create those edge loops that I need to create. So I can actually use the loop cut tool, or I can push Control R. In this case, I'll use the loop cut tool in the menu just to show you how that works. Click, and then you can sort of drag along. In this case, I don't know why it's snapping. That's interesting. But let's see what the options are. Is there any options in the tool set? So over here, let's see, correct UVs, options. No, there isn't. That's all right. Then I just prefer using the Alright, so to create the edge loops in, well, the way that I prefer to do it, I'm just going to push Control R. And I think, yeah, once I click, I can now drag along there, and then click again to confirm the loop, and you're good to go. The other cool thing is that you can actually push R and then double click and scroll your mouse wheel, to get multiple edge loops as well, which is super cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create an edge loop in line here with that roof there, just like we did it with the Mayo version. Just going to follow the same method. It's exactly the same fucking method, alright? So don't be too concerned about all that. Same method there. And one more here. And what else can we do here? Alright. I'm going to do one loop here as well. Might do another loop here, just cause, for that lower roof. And what else we got? Yep, peak of the roof, and peak. And then after that, we can start to cut that shape as we need, just like we did it in Maya. So what we're going to do there is we can actually use the knife cut tool. So this tool here, K, in the keyboard if you like to use that. But in this case, I'm going to use the K tool. And for some reason, with the tools here, it doesn't have snapping. I prefer to use snapping. So what I'm going to do is just pop out of that. And instead, I'm just going to use the K tool. And for some reason, it actually has snapping. I don't know why. So I'm going to snap to that corner there, cut up there, and push enter. Do the same thing, K, cut up here, enter. Actually, I cut it too late. I need to cut it down here. So cut it down here. There we go. Sweet. Do another cut. All the way up. Cut. And then finally, one more cut. In this case, I'm going to do the little cut down here. And we're good to go. All we need to do now is delete those faces. 1, 2, 3. Let's go through, just delete what we need to delete. And just like we have in the Maya version, the geometry is a little bit different because I went through and cut it a little bit earlier. I did a few more loops, but otherwise the method's exactly the same. Now all we need to do is push E to extrude out along the Y. You can double click Y to get it back to global mode. There's another cool feature in this software that makes it way easier to deal with. And then after that, just going to scale that flat. You can also push scale, S for scale, Y along the axis, and then push 0, and it'll actually scale with a few keyboard strokes. So that's really useful. I find it super cool. All right, there we go. Now, you may notice that we have a few little triangles here and there. Easy way to fix that is basically to, well, we can actually eliminate a few here somehow. Let's see. So we actually go to this point here, M to merge to last, and we'll sort all those out. Let's just do these ones first. Yeah, that will do it, I think. Screw it. Let's just go all the way up the chain. Do the same thing up the chain, and that will fix anything like that. So we're basically going to end up with the exact same setup as the Maya layout, essentially. And I can reintegrate those loops later on. And you'll see me do that in a second. So all I'm doing really is just simplifying the geometry back a little bit, just to make it more cohesive. So again, look at my keystrokes and you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing. M to last. This is another nice feature as well in Blender, is that you have the option of choosing the order in which things merge. So merging to last means you're merging the verts to the last selected object. At least in the pie menu in Maya, you can only do it to center, which is also a bit of a pain in the ass. Slows things down considerably. Anyway, here we go. We're working out our edge loops here. You can see it's actually done the same thing on the other side as well. So everything's actually done perfectly fine. It's all good to go. What else we got here? We got everything else is pretty much sorted. Sweet. All right. Now here's where the magic lies. So we have the mirror modifier already sorted. So now what we can do is actually add a solidify modifier. So rather than extruding, we're going to use a procedural method, or a semi-procedural method, to add solidification to this thing. So just by doing that, I push the solidify button, make sure it's underneath the mirror modifier, and then I can actually just hold down shift and give it a little bit of thickness. Ooh, nice. Turn on even thickness and that will keep everything nice and cohesive. How clean is that? Fucking awesome. All right, so now as for the structure of those fronts of the roofs, pretty simple. I'm gonna go into the option, the box underneath, go into face mode, and start to basically do the same thing within Maya, but I'm just going to extend out those geometry a little bit. Nice thing about this as well, we can just bring that down, and there we go. Get a little bit of only unfortunate thing is that there's a little bit of fucking around with the geometry here, but that's okay. You might be wondering about that little bit of overlap there. What we can actually do with this solidify is actually do it along the offset along the center line of the roof. So right now it's offset to -1. If we go to 0, it will offset evenly across the top and bottom of those faces. So you can add thickness now across the top and bottom. So now if I go in and try to get that looking nice and clean, it's a lot easier to manage basically. There we go. All right, so let's get the structure of these roofs up and running, the front of the building. So I'm going to add an edge loop here, add an edge loop here. And I might go ahead and do 2 actually. One there, one here. Bring that forward, like so. Add a loop here, add a loop here. And the nice thing as well, by default, when you add an edge loop in Blender, it automatically goes to the center. You just gotta, before you move the mouse by accident, you just gotta click it down and you're good to go. Which is also really nice. All right, sweet. So let's just do an extrusion up, just like we did before. But this time I'm gonna push M on the keyboard to merge to center. And there we have it. Same thing as before. Do the same thing on the next one. Merge to center. One more. Extrude up. Merge to center. Absolutely brilliant. Alright, so I've noticed that there is a little bit of overlap in parts, so all I need to do really is probably just bring in this edge loop here. And if I want to select an edge loop, you just hold down the Alt key, click, and there you go. It's good to go. So just want to bring that in a little bit. Do the same thing over here. And like magic, the other side is already sorted. So I don't have to worry about the other side. I just have to worry about doing this particular shape, which is awesome. All right, so there's the structure of that house done. I'll dare say it was a lot faster than doing it in Maya, dicking around with extrusions and shit. So yeah, let's get the rest of the structure going. So I'm gonna sort of intermediately switch between like I'll do more progress in one video, switch over to Maya, and do more progress still. So each video will have a bit more done to the house as we move on, rather than me having to go in and recreate the same thing over and over again. So in this case, I want to add the windows and I want to add the structure of the building as well. So let's go ahead and do that now. So starting with the structure of the building, and again, it's going to be the same sort of deal. I'm going to use the mirror modifier to do one half, and then the rest will sort of populate itself. So starting with another cube, Shift A to create an object. I'm going to bring that forward, and I'm going to bring that up in edit mode. And I'm going to just give it the right proportion. So I'm going to get the supports in like so. So I'm doing the underlying slats of wood. Bring that across, do the same thing over here. Get a little bit of overlap there, that's all good. Cool. So you may notice that once I add the mirror modifier, we're going to be encountered by a little issue. So let's go to the modifier tab. I'm going to add a mirror. I'm going to do it along the Y again, but we have a problem in that it's mirroring across itself. And that's because the point of origin in this case is offset with the center of the world. So there's two ways to go about it. We can have a reference object to use as a mirror, or we can just reset the transforms. So I'm going to go with resetting the transforms, and you'll see what happens once I do that. If I go to Control A to apply the location, the pivot point shifts back to the world center, and suddenly the mirror modifier is working just as you'd expect. Super useful stuff, because now what we can do is start just editing inside of this object. I'm going to add a duplicate of this and then rotate it and bring it this way. All right, I'm going to delete this face here because what I want to do is merge those faces along the mirror. So using the same clipping ability, I'm going to turn on clipping, merge those together. And now in face selection mode, bring this down. So I'm not actually scaling the actual object, I'm just using it in edit mode. So this is all still one object, as you can see, technically one object, but I'm working within edit mode to sort of manipulate the shapes as needed. This is the really only difference between Blender and Maya in terms of modeling technique that I like to do. So I like to actually stay within edit mode in Blender when even if I'm modeling multiple objects. I sometimes like to keep it within the same object because I find that with the modifier stack, it's less reliant on having multiple objects to do the same thing. So what I can actually do here as well, I can actually add a bevel to bevel out those wood pieces and then give it a little bit more natural feeling to it. So add a bevel, change the profile a little bit, add a few more segments, and we'll get this nice little like beveling effect going on, which is super cool. All right, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So the nice thing is about this is I can actually duplicate this along X, bring that slat this way as well, and do the other side. All right, let's get the rest of these slats up and running as well. So I'm going to stay within edit mode. I'm going to duplicate, in this case, this slat again, duplicate in Y. I'm going to rotate this in Y as well, 90 degrees, perfectly straight up. And just like before, I'm going to use snapping to snap it to the ground plane. So holding down Control, snap it there. Going to grab the top of this, bring it down, be in front view. One to go to front view, by the way. And you can see why I like to have one side here as just a perspective and then one here for front, like the one view where I can just like switch around and move the camera as I see fit. I find it really nice and easy to use this way. There's our first slat. And you can see here on the other side, because the mirror modifier is still working, it's doing it on that side too. So you get this really dynamic way of modeling. Ultimately, you can add more asymmetry to the building at the end, but as a blocking stage, it does just as well. So yeah, the methods here are pretty straightforward. And if you've been watching this series, even though it's only just started, you may have noticed a few patterns, for instance. Namely that despite the extra bells and whistles you may be getting here with modifiers, the actual modeling tools I'm using within the software, within Blender that is pretty much the same as those I'm using in Maya. So what I mean by that is I'm only using about 3 or 4 specific tools to get the job done. And those would be extrude, loop cuts, and knife tools. Pretty much, that's all there is really. Apart from that, in Maya, you would probably have to manually bevel these things, but the other tool in this case is the bevel tool, and everything else is pretty much the same. The methods are the same, the principles are the same, and if I wanted to, I can easily export this out to either Maya, Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, so you name it. And the same thing is for the Maya project. So the Maya project itself can also be exported out to other software. The nice thing about 3D is that it is like there are a lot of universal formats which make it a lot easier to do this sort of thing and work across software. Whereas, you know, say for something like a Photoshop file, that's a bitch to find alternatives for. Alright, so getting these windows up and running is pretty straightforward. I'm going to select the body of the house. I'm going to isolate select that by pushing the slash button on my keyboard. And basically, I'm going to create some edge loops that go up the structure of the house, like so. I'm going to create some more there. And then I'm going to just sort of arrange, I might do a few more as well. So I'm going to do a few more. Why not? And you can see because we're creating, we've effectively created a square there. We're actually creating some quads. And the loop will go up the body of the house. That's actually could work out to our advantage. Then I'm just going to delete the faces of where I want the windows to be. There we go. There's the windows. What else can we do? We're going to also create some structures for the windows at the top there as well. So let's see what we can do here. So I don't want to have the loop go all around the house. Let's go ahead and see about cutting some shapes here. So what I'm going to do is actually cut out another square. Might just end up cutting a shape like so. Why not? So something like that. Now, when it comes to this sort of geometry, it doesn't really matter too much because we're not planning on subdividing this. But if we do end up choosing to do some other stuff, possibly, I don't know, in the future, then we may have to basically create enough geometry that we can at least displace it, or, you know, if we do end up doing all kinds of fancy stuff like that, you know, that the geometry is pretty consistent. So that's why I'm starting adding cuts where I need to, and it really depends on what structure you're building here. But again, it's really up to you. The only hard thing is that because it's a triangle, that's the only hard part, is the triangle part makes it difficult. but we'll do. We'll deal. We'll deal. Now I'm just being pedantic about this because it gets a lot easier to do unwraps and UV unwrapping and stuff when it comes to texturing if you have some nice clean geometry to work with. So that's what matters here in this case. So let's see what we can do. I'm gonna add a loop here. Actually might make a loop across the entire width. Why not? Like so. Just do that. Another one over here. Like so. Depending on how big the window needs to be, we can always edge slide that accordingly. So I'm just going to edge slide this up, double press G to edge slide, double press G to edge slide up. I might make a smallish window up here. Get that going on. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to cut across. So. And then create faces like so. Other cool thing about this method is that we are, you could get away with maintaining at least some quads around here, like so, just the same way as we got it here. But yeah, again, it's up to you. I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna add a cut. So. First, just because I can. There we go. There's our windows all done. Now, just as we did before, what we can do is add a solidify to this thing, but instead of having it fill the entire thickness of it, we can only have it so it only extrudes inwards and keeps a gap. So what I mean by that is adding a solidify like so. If we add more thickness, you'll see it's actually adding thickness throughout the geometry. So it's actually going inwards as well and maintaining that thickness. So what we can do, instead of it actually creating more geometry on the inside, we can push only rim. So it only fills in that rim area, if that makes sense. So rather than it being completely solid, we're only going to do it the inside of the windows essentially. So that will be really useful for maintaining a poly count that's usable. So now what we have is something like this. Too easy, right? Now to wrap up this video, I'm going to actually do all the slats, all these supports that come into this house. So it's just like what we had before, but the difference now is that I'm actually going to duplicate this structure, but this time I'm going to separate it and create a separate object, because at least then it's a nice new object that will be easier to maintain in terms of separating the top from the bottom. Now, if you find yourself having issues trying to discern between objects, what you can do is go into the this tab here, go to viewport shading and switch it to random. And it gets a lot easier to see what the hell you're doing sometimes if you switch it to random. So you know what each object is essentially. Really useful stuff. So now what I want to do is basically create all that support structure that this little medieval tavern is going to have. So I'm going to thin up those little slats a little bit, and then I'm going to basically just lay out everything else. So this is essentially exactly the same as the bottom, but now I'm just going throughout the entire structure. So I'm going to time lapse the rest of this, and I'll see you shortly. here's the result we're at right now. So you can see here, it looks pretty much the same as the one in the previous video, just with a few extra bells and whistles in the windows and stuff, but it's pretty much the same thing, and the method would be exactly the same in Mayo anyway. That being said, there are a few things I glossed over toward the end there with the time lapse, so I'm going to probably do a video on a few little tips and tricks in both softwares to show you how you can go about doing things a bit faster, a bit easier, and there's a few other tools that could be a lifesaver. So watch out for that video when I publish it. But until then, I'm going to let you guys continue on with this little house, and all I'm going to say is have fun and catches.